Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Horse Live. I'm your host, Michelle Anderson, Digital Managing Editor of The Horse. Tonight's topic is transitioning thoroughbreds from racing to new careers, brought to you by the Retired Racehorse Project. Have you noticed a lot of thoroughbreds on social media recently? They're for sale, they're retiring from the track and ready to move on to new careers, or they've already made the transition into eventing or dressage or even working on cattle ranches. The resurgence of popularity of the OTTB is no doubt tied to the efforts of the RRP to promote these athletic and versatile horses. Seeing OTTB posts on social media makes me a little nostalgic. When I was in 6th grade, I had outgrown my pony, so my family ended up buying my first full-sized horse. I was 12 years old, and he was 2, and just weeks off the track. Needless to say, I was a little bit over-horsed with my OTTB. But he was kind, he was smart, and he was beautiful. And I spent my teen years riding in Western and English and 4-H. One weekend, he'd be out in the mountains with my dad, and the next weekend, I'd show him in equitation and pleasure classes at our local saddle club. He sold when I left for college, but I followed him throughout his life. He died 2 years ago at the age of 28. It actually makes it a little sad to read that out loud to you guys. His last job was carrying around the kids of his third and last post-track owner, who had had him for 18 years. Looking back, I can see we made a lot of mistakes with Red. We didn't know how to let him down properly from the track, and he struggled because of that. We also didn't know how to feed his breed, and he struggled with that too. We didn't even actually have an arena to restart him in, so I rode him around the pasture. I just kind of hung on. It worked out in the end, but I wished I'd had the network that the RRP now offers for new OTTB owners. To help all of us learn more about transitioning these horses from the track, we are joined tonight by Dr. Yannick Gasarowski of Mid-Atlantic Equine Medical Center and a proud supporter of the Retired Racehorse Project. We're also joined by Stuart Pittman, who is president of the RRP. So let's go ahead and start with you, Dr. G. What is your experience with retired racehorses, and how did you get involved with this specific part of the industry?
Well, thanks, Michelle, and I guess I'll start with thank you guys for having me, and it's great to be here. So my experience starts on the clinical side, obviously, just as a veterinarian. We do a lot of work on actively racing horses, and the more you work on actively racing horses, you realize there are a lot of reasons for racehorses to retire, and I started to notice a lot of our off-track thoroughbred clientele, they have these preconceived notions that most racehorses are retired for traumatic reasons, or they're washed up, they're burnt out, broken down, and it's just not true. There's so many thoroughbreds that retire for so many different reasons that are so useful in second career capacity that it started to become a passion. I love the thoroughbred horse in general. I think it's a versatile breed. It's an amazing breed. Obviously, I'm biased, but the thoroughbred breed can do anything. I mean, you'll see. I think it's rare to see a type of breed or type of horse that will excel no matter what arena you put it in. And the thoroughbred, you'll see them in any sport out there competing successfully. So pairing the huge source of healthy off-track thoroughbreds with a veterinary career just seemed kind of natural, and got into counseling people with it, and then we ended up supporting a couple thoroughbred-specific. We started as retirement programs. They then quickly realized they could develop into rehabilitation programs, and then, as Stuart does so phenomenally, transferring them to second careers altogether. And it's just easy for any vet to get wrapped up there.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I had. He trained on the track. He never actually started, but he was definitely faster than all of my friends' horses. So he was fun for me.
That's great.
Stuart, can you tell us about your involvement with the OTTBs and why you're so passionate about this part of the industry?
Yeah. I grew up riding a pony, like a 12 two-hand Chincoteague pony, and we started fox hunting when I was about 9 years old. And the cool people were all riding thoroughbreds, and they were steeplechasing and they were fox hunting, and so it was a pretty natural thing then. I'm kind of old. I'm 56 now. It was a natural thing to want to ride a thoroughbred, and so that's what I did as soon as I was big enough. And I got Hurricane Hannah. She was a California bred who had a big old chip in her ankle. and got that taken out, and off we went, and we got up to preliminary eventing, and she was my first real dream horse, and then I got away from horses for about 10 years, and then came back to it and decided I wanted to make a living on the family's farm, and I had to figure out a way to do that. And so I went to the racetrack, and I started getting horses off the racetrack from people I knew and turning them into event horses and selling them. And that turned into a cool business for me, and it made me a professional. I got out of it for a while, and I tried to breed horses, and that didn't work out as well. You couldn't make money breeding horses waiting till they were 4 or 5 years old, and I kept seeing horses off the track that I wish I could say I bred them. So I got back to the horses off the track, and then I kind of got frustrated with the whole warm blood invasion thing. So we started the Retired Racehorse Project to educate people and bring the thoroughbred back, and it's really taken off.
Yeah, for sure. I want to give everyone a quick review of our Ask the Horse live format. We're going to be starting with the questions that everyone submitted during registration. If you have questions that you'd like to ask live, or if you have a follow-up question to one of our answers, go ahead and send your questions in if you're listening to us via your computer. We're going to do our best to get to as many of your questions as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to put the first question to you, Stuart. Kayleen in Ontario, Canada wants to know, where are the best resources to find a horse to get off the track? Is it from race owners, nonprofits? What is your suggestion?
Well, I think it depends a lot on your experience and who you know and what's in your area. And a lot of people are doing this for the thoroughbred makeover, so they're all trying to get the best horse, which is natural. Everybody wants the best horse they can find. So on the Retired Racehorse website, retiredracehorseproject.org, there's a horse listings, which has got usually 200 or 300 horses in it. If you go to the right column, down below the advanced search section, there's a little button that most people don't notice. So we should probably make it a bigger button. And it says more horse source links. And if you click on it, there are links to about 30 or 40 different organizations or sites. All the Tanner chapters are there, and they're great because they're listing horses that are at the track or still with racing owners if you want to go straight to the source. There are some of the nonprofits that do listings, and then there are about 18 Facebook pages from OTTB Connect on down to a whole bunch of others, some of which are specific to offspring of certain stallions. So there's a lot of online stuff, and online shopping is, it's a little scary, a little dangerous. I wrote an article in our last issue of Off Track Thoroughbred magazine about just that. But there are a lot of private resellers, trainers that are great. There are a lot of nonprofit aftercare organizations that are subsidized mostly by the racing industry that are great. And really, I can't say that one source is better than any others. If you're a total beginner, there's nothing wrong with getting a horse that's already been retrained by somebody else as well.
Okay. Our next question is for Dr. G, and it's from Kimberly in Reno, Nevada. And Kimberly wants to know, what are the best diagnostics to run or pre-purchase elements of the pre-purchase exam to be done before you buy an OTTB?
It's going to depend mostly on what you plan to use that horse for. If you're buying a horse strictly as a pet, you may not even need a real pre-purchase. I mean, that's a scary thing to say, but if you're not needing much of a performance out of that horse, then you could get away with just a quick once-over, make sure it's healthy, not going to introduce anything foreign to your barn, your farm, if you have one. But if you're looking for performance, you're young Stuart Pittman looking to make prelim eventer, you're going to need a true once-over, where you're looking at lameness first and foremost. Radiographs end up being a flying ointment sometimes. There are so many issues that can come up with radiographs that do or don't affect some horses. So doing a pre-purchase exam that involves good lameness and flexion testing examination, and then radiographs. Specifically in the thoroughbred racehorse, I do the front feet and the fetlocks. Those are, and the knees. Front feet, front fetlock, and knees. That's probably a bare minimum if you're looking for an athletic thoroughbred down the road. That's where most of their problems crop up, and those are the joints that have most of the issues. If you start radiographing the whole horse, that's fine, but you're going to come into other problems that you're not going to know what to make of them. The other areas are a little bit less pertinent to what that horse is going to do. You know, if you're looking to turn an off-track thoroughbred into an upper-level dressage horse, well, then you might as well look into other areas. One other caveat is that if you are planning on investment-style resale, you're going to need a more complete set of radiographs. You know, both front feet, all four fetlocks, hocks, and stifle, because that's what's going to be radiographed once you try to sell that investment to the next person down the line. And you're going to want to know what you're starting with, because even if it doesn't affect the horse clinically, it could dramatically affect the sale. Another big one we see in the thoroughbreds is they're predisposed to their dorsal spinous processes being on top of each other, or what is typically termed kissing spines. And about 90% of horses with radiographically abnormal dorsal spinous processes are completely fine and non-clinical. There are 10% that it's going to affect their back, and when it does, it's a big deal. But it will kill 99% of your sales if somebody x-rays your horse's back and you see that. So that's a caveat for the investment crowd. For the athletes in the crowd, you're looking for an excellent lameness exam and then radiographs. What I see is people going on radiographs alone. You know, they're not near the horse, they don't know any investing in the horse, they take a set of x-rays are clean or clean enough, and they say, okay, let's go. But, you know, I cannot stress the clinical examination enough, especially for a horse that needs to perform. You need a vet with their hands on, flexing, jogging, and making sure that horse is okay. So bare minimum, the once over if you don't have much to do. If you do want athletic endeavors with the horse, flexion, lameness, and a basic set of films. And if you plan to invest in style resale of the horse, then you're going to want a more complete pre-purchase rad set.
We have a question from our live audience for Stuart. It's from Allie, and she said that she's seen the phrase war horse in a few ad listings for OTTBs. What does this mean? Can you explain that to our audience?
Sure. I just want to throw out though on the last one that my old friend Jimmy Wofford used to say that the horses that have clean the horses that have clean X-rays get sold, and the horses that have bad X-rays go to the Olympics. Anyway, because you keep them. Yeah. So warhorse, warhorse means ran a lot, and there's no definition that I know of how many races that is. Some of us think of about 50 races as qualifying a horse as a warhorse, and I love them. And the reason is that, you know, when you get a horse off the track, if you get a 2 or 3 year old, it's a 2 or 3 year old. You know, it's a baby, and its brain and its body are still young horse. And when you get a horse that has raced 50 times, especially if it's 7, 8 years old or so, it's got a different temperament. And it's also proven usually that it's going to stay sound because it can hold up to that much racing. So some of them might be in bad shape, but I've seen horses that raced a lot, really become very good trail horses and fox hunters, but also some of them be real athletes. But it's just that they're more broke. They've seen more, and they tend to be underappreciated.
We have a follow-up question for Dr. G, going back to those pre-purchase exams. Sadie's in our live audience, and she wants to know how big of a deal breaker previous injuries are, especially the quote-unquote scary ones, such as suspensory injuries, sesamoids. If you're looking for a thoroughbred as a mid to upper level sport horse, should you maybe pass on those kind of injuries?
I mean, the knee-jerk reaction has to be, in a way, yes. I mean, if you're looking for an upper level, if you throw that mid to upper level in there, that's the killer. If you're looking for a mid to upper level, don't pass on all injuries, but specifically blown suspensory, really bad suspensory branches, anything with significant arthritis already, those are going to have to be passed. But I will also say that some of the best horses that we're actively treating in our practice at the moment have these injuries, blown suspension. They may be lower level athletics, but they're doing very, very well. So if you specifically want to curtail that question to the upper level performing horse, then suspensory is probably a good one to stay away from. Now, I'll also throw in that if that suspensory injury was properly dealt with, the horse flexes negative and is sound on pre-purchase, then that would be a risk worth taking. You'll probably get that horse for a bargain too, because it's going to have, if it's got a blown suspensory, it's going to look bad, and they're going to have a tough time getting, moving that horse along. So it's tough to ever say disregard it completely, and some of these horses will surprise you. I mean, there are thoroughbreds out there performing with injuries that you wouldn't even think they could possibly come back from. But yeah, suspensory is one I'd stay away from for an upper level horse.
Okay. We have another follow-up question, Dr. G, that's health related. Jesse wants to know if upper respiratory problems that affect the horses on the track will impact the thoroughbred when it moves on to a second career.
Great question. And those are, I know Stuart mentioned Warhorse might be one of his diamonds in the rough. For me, certain respiratory, actually most respiratory issues are diamonds in the rough, because a horse that cannot breathe properly or makes noise while it's running or has a little bit of an air intake problem cannot possibly be a successful racehorse. This means you're probably getting a racehorse that is not very heavily raced, was probably retired or moved along earlier. And most respiratory issues that plague a thoroughbred or eliminate the career potential for a thoroughbred are not issues at all for their second career owners. Now, in the case of a paralyzed arytenoid or severe chondritis, you may need to deal with those cases, but there are surgeries to fix them. They're pretty high success rates. You're talking, for tieback or arytenoidectomy to fix those upper airway issues, you're talking success rates in the 80 to 90% range, and you can get some really nice horses that way. Some of the best horses are bleeders, or horses with exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage. They're exercising hard on the track. Some horses will just spontaneously bleed. For those in our audience who aren't familiar with the term bleeder, when they hit the extreme positive and negative inspiratory, expiratory pressures at full speed, it'll break down the capillaries, it'll cause them to bleed, and that horse is taken by the stewards out of it. They cannot race, they cannot train. Some horses like that, it's almost impossible to get rid of that issue as a racehorse. Those horses can become second career horses and never face that issue at all. So you probably got a horse that's not a war horse, that's probably quite healthy in terms of its number of miles that have been put on it, and that type of disease won't plague you as a second career owner. So yeah, off-track thoroughbreds with respiratory disease, as long as your vet's checking it out and telling you what it means for that horse specifically, almost all of them are good news for a retiring racehorse.
Okay. Our next question is for Stuart, and it's from Jan in Bend, Oregon. That's where I am. I don't know Jan, but if you're listening, Jan, hi, neighbor. Stuart, she wants to know how you select a OTTB that is amateur friendly. And I would like to have you go a step beyond that even and explain what it's like to go to the track and purchase a horse if you're buying direct from the track. So can you, how do you see if they might be an amateur friendly horse? Do you have any tricks up your sleeve?
Yeah. Luck. No. First of all, if you really need an amateur-friendly horse, probably the racetrack isn't your number one place to shop. You're better off going somewhere where the horse has been let down and where you can actually ride it. You can't ride at the track and really get a good sense of horse's temperament. But when you do go to the track, especially if you know people that you have a relationship with, so they're gonna tell you the truth. Exercise riders will tell you when there's a horse that is really easy or really quiet, and they won't lie. Most people won't lie completely. They have the horse's interest in mind, and so if a horse is nuts, they're not going to tell you he's quiet. But it's a real different environment, so they can be very different at the track than they are off the track. But I mean, I do, when I shop at the track, I do look for temperament, and I do it by looking them in the eye, walking into the stall, putting my hands on the horse, touching him everywhere, and just seeing how he reacts to my touch, for one, and sort of weighing that with what people say. And sometimes when you're at the track, you're getting a horse for often very little money, you really like the horse, you move fast. You know, I've been there with a horse trailer where I've come home with 2 or 3, and you have to take a risk. But if you're getting one horse and you need to know that it's going to be an amateur-friendly horse, you're probably better off going to an aftercare organization or a person who's taken the horse off the track and giving it some time and seeing what it's like when it's let down.
Okay. I watched one of our OTTB Facebook pages here on the West Coast and saw a pony horse come through, and I sent him to a friend, and she was like, I want him, let's go get him. And then she was like, but I can't ride him. I was like, no, you can't ride him. So what expectations should people have when they go to the track of how much hands-on they'll get with the animal?
Yeah, it's tough, which is why I think every racetrack should have somebody who works for the Horsemen's Organization who is there to help people who come onto the track to look at horses. Some of the canter affiliates will go with you, and when you look at horses. But when you go, first of all, the trainer has to get you in to the backside. So they usually have to leave your name at the gate where the guard is. Sometimes some tracks they have to ask you there, and you go in. And the horse is generally in a stall. They're tacked up in a stall. They're groomed in a stall, tied in a stall. So that's usually where you meet them. It's often dark. It's often hard to tell much about them. They'll usually bring them out of the stall and they'll walk them in the shed row. You can watch them walk. They'll jog, but often they're jogging on pavement between the barns. Usually on a slant because it's for drainage, and the horses are pretty hot when they come out of their stalls because they're in stalls all day, and so they trot tense, and you often can't tell a whole lot about their movement other than that if they're even or uneven. But you do get a sense of their conformation, and you get a little bit of a sense of their temperament. You can schedule when you know they're going to gallop, and you can go out and watch them, and you can watch them race, and you can watch them in the paddock at a race, and that's always interesting if they're still running. But you have to have a license to ride at the track. So unless you have a license, you can't go ride.
Yeah. So we have a question, Stuart, from Sarah in our live audience. You mentioned horses getting let down, possibly before an amateur gets it. Sarah wants to know, in a nutshell, how do you go about letting a horse down off the track? Do you have a process that you've developed for that?
It depends on the horse. So some people always let a horse have time without being worked, and they'll turn them out. And some people will go right ahead and work. My theory is that what we do here is we'll bring a horse. Usually they're sent to us for training, so the owner expects them to be worked. But if it's right off the track, we'll take them in. We're lucky we have an indoor arena. And we'll watch them move. Sometimes you can lunge, sometimes you can't. They get too excited on the lunge line if they haven't lunged. But watch them move and see if they feel comfortable in their body. Get on and ride and see if they feel comfortable being ridden. If you feel like the riding is the horse is happy and the horse is progressing, then I believe that riding is good as part of the letdown, part of the transition. So they're still being let down, but they're getting some exercise and they're in a routine which they're used to. And I find that you're better off in your training sometimes than turning them out and letting them become wild horses. The throwing them out and letting their shoes fall off and letting them get thin and allowing them to go out there and suffer is not what I recommend. Some people swear by it. Some people think, oh, well, then they're real quiet and you get on and you ride them. But most people nowadays will gradually reduce their feed, gradually increase their turnout. Some horses, you turn them out in a field when they've been at the track and they stand by the gate weaving because they want to come in. So you have to and acclimate them to the group. So every horse is an individual, and let down for every horse really depends on how that horse feels. But it's a minority of horses that come off the track with loose muscles in their back and that really swing. And that's a great thing when you can find it. But even the ones that are tight, if they're not in pain and they're just tight, I really believe that the work if it's good work and it's productive work, is part of what loosens them, stretches them, and makes them happy and makes them progress.
Okay. We have another question from our live audience. This one's for Dr. G. Kay says that her OTTB had a severe reaction to a particular vaccine. In your practice, have you found that thoroughbreds are more prone to reactions when they're vaccinated?
Straight answer is no. There we see vaccine reactions. They're infrequent, but we see them across all breeds. So I'd not say that thoroughbred is predisposed by any stretch of imagination.
Okay. Our next question is, I think Dr. G can start, and then I'm sure Stuart will have some great insight on this too. Sarah in Kentucky wants to know, what is the most important thing you look for in a potential project horse as far as their conformation?
Well, it would, again, it depend a little bit on what your project is. I mean, what do you plan on doing with that horse? In some cases, conformation just isn't going to matter a whole lot. For me, the simple answer is I try to stay away from horses that have a toe in, ankle out, or the fetlock embarrassed is the medical term, but if the toes come in and the fetlocks bow out, or if the knees bow out. So if you're looking at that horse from straight in front of the horse, if it looks like he's kind of bow-legged in front, that's a harsh conformation on the joints, on the fetlock and the knees. And if a horse has raced like that, trained like that, and you plan on continuing athletic work like that, I stay away from those. Otherwise, other conformational issues, horses can work pretty well within their own conformation. You know, conformation comes up in the racing world a lot for discussion because the horses are going so fast. It's so hard on their body that they've got to have perfect conformation to stay sound. But if you're off the track, small flaws in conformation don't matter as much as people would think that they do. But for me, I'd stay away from toe in, fetlock out, and knees out.
Okay. And Stuart, what are you looking for in conformation in a thoroughbred for a new career?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I would add feet to the list. That not all thoroughbreds have great feet, and sometimes they don't look as good because of the way they've been shod. But you know, when you can find one that's got some heel and that's got a decent sized foot with a good wall, that's a great thing for staying sound. And I agree that, you know, most thoroughbreds have pretty darn good conformation, and they're built to be athletes, and so they can do most of the things we want to do. And you know, of course, for eventing and dressage, we like a more uphill build. So the ones that look a little bit more like quarter horses and downhill probably aren't going to move as well and aren't going to jump as well, although there's certainly exceptions to that. They're not going to be as comfortable to canter down to a jump as much of the uphill horse. And uphill means, you know, nice when the withers are a little higher than the croup, at least level, but I like them higher. I like big prominent withers. And when the neck comes up out of the shoulder in a higher place than, you know, whether the horse is looking up or looking down. And that's sometimes hard to judge, but with experience, you sort of get a feel for how they're going to move from the way they stand. But I've seen them in all shapes and sizes be great horses in all kinds of sports.
Oh, I think it's fun to see the horses in their sales videos that have been posted, and then see them down the road when they're under work and how they've developed in that year or so of work. It's fun to see how they progress. Stuart, we have a question from Cheryl in Florida, and Cheryl wants to know how many horses are successful versus unsuccessful in transitioning. Are there some horses that just don't make it to second careers?
Oh yeah, but I have no idea what the numbers are. I know that it depends largely on who's training them. So the success rate is much higher from somebody who's good at what they do, and I guess, you know, there's probably a success rate with non-race horses too that one could look at. So it's certainly a vast majority. And in the thoroughbred makeover, it's, I guess, success. It's hard to measure success. You know, there are of the horses that do the 11, 10 months or so. Some of them have less than that, 6 months, to prepare for the makeover, where they start from scratch. About 60 to 65% actually show up, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't mean that the others failed. Often it was because they were successful and they sold them before the makeover, or that they had some minor injury that kept them from going, just like a horse show, like a stone bruise, or that some people will get 2 or 3 horses and then they'll switch and they'll take the one that's doing the best. So I've got to say that among the makeover horses, probably more like 90% or more end up having some career, but I think it depends a lot on the training. Most work out, but it's the decisions you make at the beginning and how good a job you do.
We have a question, Stuart, from our live audience. It's from Sophie. She said that she is 17 years old and just started leasing a 7-year-old OTTB. He is doing very well under saddle. However, his ground manners are not so great. She says she's new to the breed, so she's struggling with how exactly to deal with his poor ground manners. How would you go about working on improving an OTTB's ground manners?
Well, the first thing I would say is that make sure that the person is also trained well. The horses that come right off the track are used to professionals, and if you go around the track, most of the people are very deliberate in their movements on the ground. They're very businesslike, and they're not second guessing the horse. There's not a lot of hesitation. They're confident, and so if the handler is confident and deliberate in everything that they do, the horse will start to trust a lot more than if you put mom who's not used to horses and you say, can you hold it, at the horse show, and it goes south real fast. But the other thing about a thoroughbred versus another breed is that horses find peace in different ways, and some are most peaceful when they're standing with all 4 feet attached to the ground. A lot of thoroughbreds are much more comfortable when they're moving. So when you're mounting, it might take some time for a thoroughbred to stand to be mounted, and allowing the horse to walk away as you're mounting may actually be the best strategy for a while. And allowing a horse to walk in a circle might be a better strategy than forcing it to stand, to allow it to eventually get to the point where it will stand. So don't be afraid of motion, forward motion. It's what they're bred for. And just be very, very precise and firm. And if it takes a chain over the nose, a chain shank, or something to give you a boundary so that the horse can work within a boundary and that boundary does not give, the horse will usually become more calm too than if they can just push through the boundary because they're stronger than you.
Yeah. Are there things that the horses coming off the track may not know how to do that you might expect a horse of a similar age that had been raised in a show barn would know how to do? For example, standing in cross ties. Like, should you expect that the horse knows how to stand in cross ties, or should you expect that you need to train it to do that, or to hard tie to a hitching rail, or even loading in the trailer? Are those things that the horse is going to know how to do?
Well, they're generally going to have loaded in trailers or vans, often, larger shipping vans, more likely. And they're rarely cross-tied, almost never at the track. They're usually tied in their stall, so not out in the open either. They generally walk off as the rider is lifted up onto their backs, and they're allowed to walk away. So yes, those are all issues. They're usually great at being, hosed, and because they get bathed every day, most of them, at least in the warmer part of the year. Of course, they don't always steer so good, and they don't listen to the legs so good. So go to the track and watch what a horse does, and it'll tell you what they're not good at or what they haven't done.
Okay.
There's plenty. But they're also the most intelligent breed on the planet, I believe. The flight instinct makes them, and the sensitivity makes them respond well to training, and they seem intelligent. I don't know how you define intelligence necessarily, but they certainly learn fast. They think quick, and that works for you and against you.
We have a question for Dr. G. It's from Penny in British Columbia, Canada, and she wants to know about building top lines without using gadgets. Does specific nutrition really make a difference in developing a top line in a horse?
The short answer, if I might get sarcastic, is show me a food that makes my biceps bigger, and I'll show you something that can make your top line, your horse's top line bigger. No, any sort of nutrition that goes into the horse's body is going to be divided up amongst, the entirety of the body. So any dietary intake that's going to help a horse system-wide may help your top line, but there's no nutritional products, byproducts, supplements, anything like that that's going to specifically help a specific area. And it is about the way you work the horse, the way you train the horse, and what you're doing with that horse to build musculature. Some of the ways that we train these days is harmful to the top line, or at least puts the horse in a position that's uncomfortable and doesn't let them build the musculature properly, whereas others are beneficial. A good example I think of helping build the top line is long and low work. And the horse, you're letting the horse get its head and its neck down, bringing its shoulders up, getting the horse into a frame, and it takes the top line to do that. Now, if you try to force a horse to do that while you're cranking its neck up in collection, all you're going to do is make that horse uncomfortable. They're not going to use their back properly, and they'll fight you. And we see a lot of horses come into the practice with the complaint of back pain and back issues, and they want the back injected or shockwaves or mesos or whatever have you, where the problem really is the way the horse is being worked. You bring up the mention of gadgets, but some of them help engender that. I think one of my favorites is the Pessoa lunging system. That's exactly what that lunging system encourages, is a long, low head carriage, have the horse use those long muscles along its back. If you take your own arm, for an example, if you take your bicep, like you're going to do a bicep curl, and you bring your bicep almost fully curled, there's only so much more pressure that you can put on your fist at the top of that curl, right? That's what a horse is doing when its back is tight and its neck is up high in the air in any form of collection. It's not using its back effectively. Whereas if you drop the head and neck down, or in our analogy, drop your fist and your forearm down, you now have a fair amount of power. You're operating your muscle at the peak of its effective operative curve, right? Some stretch in the muscle helps it be in better form for contraction. So when you're specifically talking about building musculature in the top line, especially, work that asks the horse to collect itself to some degree. I don't mean cranking the head up in the air, but to work in a frame, and that long, low head carriage is how you're going to build a successful top line. Obviously, nutrition matters to some degree, but most horses, if you put in good calories, and good calories doesn't mean $1,000 worth of hay and supplements. Good nutrition just means consistency of feeding, decent quality hay. They don't need a ton of grain. They don't need a ton of special feed. If you work them properly and feed them appropriately, they're going to be okay. That's all the nutrition you need. You don't need a single supplement unless they're specifically lacking in some nutrient department.
Our next question is,
we know Yannick's not sponsored by any supplement companies. Good.
You're right. That's exactly right.
So I was going to ask you, Stuart, how long should you expect it to take for a horse to start developing over their top line when they're coming off the track and going into other work? Is it going to take a year, or does it just depend on the horse and the rider?
No, less than a year.
Okay.
I mean, it can take a year. It can take, and as the horse usually they're putting on weight when they come off the track. Ideally, I mean, they come off lean. They come off looking good sometimes, and so when they lose some of the muscle that they have from racing, sometimes they don't look quite that good to us. But they might drop some muscle and then they have to gain it elsewhere. But certain, some horses 3 and 6 months, other horses it is a year or more. And I loved Yannick's description of all of that and how that works. And the only thing I would add to it is that in order to get the muscles working the way he described and to build things, A key is tension, and if the horse is tense in that work, even if it's in a frame and it's tense, if you imagine yourself tense, the muscles aren't. I don't think the muscles can really grow and build in the same way that if the horse is rhythmic and happy in its work, and then just working away up the hills, wherever, around the circles, whatever, rhythmic and happy. To me, somehow it seems like the muscles are doing something that is better.
Okay. We have
and I can put that in scientific terms.
Yeah, well, it's exactly right, Stuart. I mean, I think you said this. What you said is exactly right. When the horse is moving, relaxed, what you said, that relaxation is the stretch of the muscle. A horse that's tense is trying to work its muscles when they're already at full contraction. It doesn't build muscle. It hovers there in a full contracted state, and that's not how muscle builds. And as a matter of fact, they can predispose themselves to injuries working like that as well. That's why I think they come into the clinic with pain for sore back, when really you just need to get them to relax and ride or train them properly.
So, Stuart, I have a question for you in that relaxation and rhythm for the horse. I have a hot little mare who has quite a bit of thoroughbred in her, and she reminds me of my thoroughbred that I had when I was a kid, because she is tense for a long time, and you kind of have to work her down from that. How do you recommend getting that horse to the point that they are relaxed? Does it take time during that individual ride, or is there a point where you've gotten them so exhausted that from the warm-up that they can't really do the work to finish relaxed? It's very challenging.
Definitely not the recipe. Yeah. Well, the horses really define that. They, when you're training, you want to stay below a certain level of tension. You don't want to just stand around and do nothing, because you never accomplish anything. It's the only time that the horse is relaxed is standing still and or walking. And then as soon as you trot, the horse becomes tense. It doesn't mean you should never trot, but you have to be smart. You have to figure out what does keep the horse below a certain level of tension, and try not to let it boil over. And anytime you get frustrated, it's going to boil over. Anytime you get at all tough or abusive, it's going to boil over. And the best thing to do is to just stop and put the horse away and try again another day. But I've never found a horse that gets better when it feels like it's battling against your aids. Your aids can be firm, they can be strong, and they have to be for the horse to learn not to push through them sometimes. But and like I think I said before that thoroughbreds love to work. Maybe I didn't say this, but they love motion, and they can really relax in the motion. So sometimes it requires cantering, because that's the gait where they happen to be the most rhythmic and happy. And sometimes it might even mean cantering out in an open field in a 2-point with your hands down like an exercise rider, breathing and waiting for the horse to settle into its rhythm, and then it becomes happy. Sometimes it's on the trail. Other horses freak out on the trail. Sometimes, so it's different with every horse. So you just have to find that place where the horse is at peace and figure out how to train within that zone.
Mm-hmm. We have questions to our audience. It's from Jackie, and she said that she's been working in horse racing for over 20 years and believes that with the correct training, most thoroughbreds can do anything. She says that she believes a lot of issues during transition come from riders' lack of knowledge regarding the horse's previous lifestyle and how to work with the thoroughbreds. How do you help the rider transition to the thoroughbred if that hasn't been their experience? Say it's someone who has been riding quarter horses or warm bloods and is changing over to the thoroughbreds. How should they change their expectations with their OTTB?
Well, I think the really good trainers who have a really good feel, it doesn't matter whether they've been around thoroughbreds. I've seen some of that with the makeover with folks who come up, particularly out of the quarter horse world. They listen to the horse and they respond, and then they say, wow, these thoroughbreds are fantastic. I had no idea. So so some people are just good. They have good feel, and they have good experience that they got with other breeds. Maybe I do think that people who work with thoroughbreds at the track have learned to be sympathetic. They've learned to be clear and firm. But you know, good horsemen tend to be, I find, pretty calm people. And a lot of these exercise riders have, you know, who've handled all different kinds of horses. They're fantastic. I mean, and one thing that you'll notice about them is that they're very still on top of a horse. There's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of flailing around, and they know where the middle of the horse is. And if you can stay still in the middle of a horse, a thoroughbred is going to love you, and not work against the motion. So I think I really do believe that there's nothing better for a rider than to go to the track and learn how to gallop a racehorse. But that it's not so much knowledge of thoroughbreds at the track. It's feel, and having allowed them to teach you where their middle is and how to stay still, and just how to communicate from that sort of that magical place that you see those exercise riders find, and some of those good jockeys.
Okay. Well, we're going to go from the hot horses to the not so hot horse. Dr. G, this question's for you. It's from Sherry in Ontario, Canada. She says her OTTB drags his toes and seems to lack energy. He is very motivated, but she's had him checked by various body workers and hasn't figured out what's going on with him. What suggestions you have for someone who has an OTTB that seems lethargic? Oh, Dr. G?
Did I lose you? Hello?
Oh, are you back? Dr. G?
Yeah, I can hear you guys pretty clearly.
Oh,
Sorry.
did you hear the question about the lethargic thoroughbred?
Yes, I never seem to lose you guys. So what I was saying is, I think the first thing you need to do is determine whether the horse is truly lethargic, or is it sick or painful. You know, there are a number of reasons that a horse can do the things described, namely seem to lack energy and catch the toes. Based on the nature of the question, it's very motivated. I think if you're picking up that your horse is very motivated, he probably isn't truly lethargic as much as dragging a toe or just not having that impulsion or the power from behind, or everybody kind of describes it a different way. First and foremost, I think lameness when they're catching the toe. Any sort of heel pain, foot pain is classic associated with catching the front toes. If the horse is catching or dragging its rear toes, behind the feet, then I think stifle pain. I think upper limb pain predominantly. But you also have to consider neurologic disease. I mean, some horses are retired from the track because they know something's wrong. The horse isn't running well, doesn't stride well, something's wrong, but nobody can really place their finger on it. The time isn't necessarily dedicated to thorough evaluation on the track, and sometimes they get passed on. They're not injured, so theoretically they might make a good second career or off-track thoroughbred type horse. But when you evaluate them from a closer standpoint with a more discerning eye, you start to see subtle neurologic deficits that weren't picked up before. So I honestly, I think the best thing to do is have your veterinarian look at the horse with an eye for eliminating lameness issues first and foremost. But then if the horse doesn't seem painful or sore at all, then have a neurologic evaluation performed where they're circling the horse tightly, looking for any sort of gait deficits. Does the horse know exactly where its feet are? Does it place them consistently? Does it wing them out? And then weakness testing. So if the horse seems weak or lethargic, there are neurologic diseases that can do that. They'll do a tail pull test. They'll do a number of different step tests with the horse that I won't go through each one of them now, but there are a variety of tests that your vet will do to try to determine, is the horse painful or is he neurologic? And then if the horse is the horse in good body condition, if the horse is wasting away in spite of work, maybe you need to look at your nutrition bill. That could be another. What's in the feed bill? Is he getting enough hay? Is he getting an adequate intake for the amount of work that he's doing? Most are. As a matter of fact, I find most are overfed. But technically, that could be another area to look. So lameness and pain first and foremost, and if nothing's showing up there, I would look to a neurologic examination.
Okay. We have a question from our live audience for Stuart. Callie wants to know if a thoroughbred can become scared or nervous around other horses as a result of training at the track, and if so, how likely is it that this can be overcome with training after they've come off the track?
Good question. Because some horses clearly have a temperament that makes them more nervous and sensitive to things coming at them just because they're scared horses. But yeah, I believe that I mean, it works both ways. You know, thoroughbreds are used to being ridden with other horses. And so they actually often, like any horse, takes comfort in the herd. But I've had some who in the warm-up ring at a horse show, there's horses come in all directions, just come undone. And they just want to get the heck out of there. And sometimes you don't know it until you get to the horse show because you ride alone at home or with not many people around. And so it can be a hard thing to school. And, you know, the only thing I can say if you do have a horse like that is that, yes, the horse can be acclimated, but that it might take spending a lot of time standing around in a warm-up ring or just standing at the edge of the warm-up ring, you know, with the horse in hand. Finding situations like that, if you're at a place with a bunch of people and there's, you know, riding lessons going on and a bunch of people in the ring, just going in there and sitting on the horse or standing there until so that they're not moving, thinking that, you know, they're going to get hit. But and, you know, and there are probably horses that have been in situations at the track that scared them, but yeah, I don't know how much of that has to do with being a racehorse and how much it has to do with just the natural instinct of a horse to protect itself when everybody's running around.
Yeah.
But the solution would be the same, you know, solution's the same either way.
Okay. Dr. G, our next question is for you. It's from Debbie in Aztec, New Mexico. She wants to know how you determine if a horse coming off the track might have ulcers.
Ulcer. So the short answer is that you need a gastroscope. Gastroscopy is a procedure where the vet is going to take about a 3-meter or 9-foot long scope, run it through this horse's nose, down the throat, and into the esophagus and down into the stomach and look and see if they're there. That is the only way that you can positively tell whether your horse has ulcers or not. The tricky thing about ulcers is that there are so many different behaviors and issues that we associate with ulcers that may or may not be true. We see horses coming in with the thought that they have ulcers based on not eating, mild colic, girthiness, unwillingness to move forward, non-responsive to the leg. You could go on forever with all the different ailments that are blamed on ulceration, but when it comes down to it, the only way to truly tell if your horse has ulcers is to scope its stomach. That is almost never done in the field because it takes a 3-meter long endoscope, and it's just an uncommon thing to find in the field. So you'll probably have to go to a referral type center for that. Some of the companies that, specifically Marielle, have programs where they'll go different places with a person specifically, or veterinarian specifically equipped to do these types of gastroscopies, and they'll do them for free. And they'll check your horse, and they run a bunch of horses through, and obviously they make their money selling the product when they diagnose enough horses with ulcers, but you can get the horse for free in some cases. But if you think your horse is truly suffering from ulcers, then the best thing to do is take it to a clinic and have it scoped.
Stuart, we have a question from Tom in our live audience. Tom says he adopted a thoroughbred last month. She came without a history. I can't make out her tattoo to properly identify her. Do you have any suggestions on what I can try to find out who she is?
What's Jockey Club? Look, if you go to the Jockey Club website, there's, I forget what it's called. Maybe one of you remembers Jockey Club. Look up something. There's a way that they can help you if you take a photograph and send it in of the tattoo and try to help figure out based on the horse's color and markings and difficult to read tattoo, possibly. Otherwise, if there's no history, you don't know where the horse came from. Or I don't know, maybe can you do DNA testing for this, Yannick? I don't know. Soon they will all have a microchip. Huh?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go. And soon they will all have the microchip. But for now, DNA testing is probably no good unless you've got the sire, the sire and dam both, on the registry. I think it's unlikely to help you.
Well,
yeah, as of last year, right? They all, was it 17 was the first year that all the foals got microchips rather than tattoos. They're still going to tattoo, I think, for a while.
They are for now.
Yeah. I just received a message from Erica, our news editor, who is reading your questions as they come in. And her suggestion, what she had to do with her off-track thoroughbred, was go in a very dark stall with a very bright flashlight to try to make out the tattoo, and that helped her. I know she knows who her horse is, so she figured it out. I think it probably took a little detective work. Our next question is for Dr. G, and it's from Greg in British Columbia, Canada. And Greg wants to know if you advise new owners of off-track thoroughbreds to take their horses' shoes off and leave them barefooted, or to boot them when required, or should they have shoes on?
Stuart alluded to the thoroughbred foot early on in the discussion. I think it was a great point that I should have definitely added to the confirmational checklist. Thank you, Stuart. But along those lines, thoroughbred are known for their thin, shelly feet, and oftentimes when they're in the transition process, the feet are neglected. So what I'll say to clients is, if the horse is doing well, leave the horse in whatever setup you've got. If the horse comes to you barefoot and is comfortable, then fine. Just trim lightly and leave the horse barefoot. If the horse comes in shoes and is okay, leave the horse in shoes, even if those shoes are growing under, where the hoof is completely overgrown. The shoe, well due for trimming. Pull the shoe, have the horse trimmed, but reapply a shoe. So basically, try to maintain status quo. If the horse is sore, then you're going to have to either change the style of shoeing, apply a shoe. And in some extreme cases where you've got such a thin, shelly hoof wall, flat foot, low underrun heels, a boot might not be a bad idea. Something like a soft ride boot with the dual density inserts, the little section where the frog sits is raised slightly. That can give a little bit of frog support. And sometimes those boots, or any sort of protective boot, will give a horse a chance to grow a little bit of foot, so you and your farrier can start to work together. But it takes a dedicated owner with a consistent, dedicated farrier to get somebody's feet the way they need to go. The classic problems are the thin, shelly hoof walls and underrun heels. I mean, some of these horses, for a light, fast foot is what they're after on the track, and some of these horses are just taken right down to the heel, where the coronary band of the heel is almost on the ground. And if that's the case, you're going to have to offer a little protection there.
Our next question is for Stuart. It's from Ed in our live audience, and Ed would like to know how much an amateur rider can depend on a sales description of a horse to feel good about pursuing it to purchase. Do you have any suggestions on that, Stuart?
Not much. The things that people write in ads for horses, there's a lot of opinion that goes in, 10 mover, clips, loads, bays, this, that, and the other. That is pretty meaningless usually. Facts are facts though. So competition records, age, height, which height can sometimes be exaggerated.
Yes.
But a lot of people will tell you stories about horse shopping where, the horse was nothing like what the description was. Videos and photographs don't completely lie. They give you some indication. But that's why shopping for horses is frustrating. And it depends on who it is who's selling the horse too. So there are some very reputable people who, what they say is you can pretty much count on it because they have a reputation that they need to uphold. But even then, it's their opinion, and you might not agree with it when you get there. So, but it's all you got to go on. So you do.
Okay. We
I think
have
that's probably a vote for the organizations that help with this. You're going to get a much more consistent description from those groups, like RRP, like Turning for Home, some of the track associated groups that are helping the horse along.
Yep.
We have a question for Dr. G from our live audience. Julie is thinking about purchasing a thoroughbred as a broodmare. How long should she wait after her last race to be bred?
Technically, there's no need for any wait period at all. She needs it. There really isn't. You could have a breeding soundness examination done. You could give her a let down or cool off period if you wanted to try to make it a little safer to be around her, and she's not going to transition well to or easily from a racehorse on a track to a breeding scenario. But biologically and physiologically, she's ready to go. So technically, you don't need any wait period.
Okay. Well, we unfortunately are out of time. For everyone who's listening, I do know that Jennifer, our web producer, posted a link in the chat to our resource article. We came up with our 10 top resources on thehorse.com about transitioning horses and off-track thoroughbreds. You can find that at thehorse.com/OTTB resources. And so take a look at that if you're looking for more information. I want to go ahead and thank Dr. G and Stuart Pittman for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank everyone who submitted questions ahead of time and everyone who listened live, and to the Retired Racehorse Project for all it does to support and promote off-track thoroughbreds. I hope you can join us next month for Ask the Horse Live. Until then, from all of us here at The Horse, have a great night.